gentlemen, boys and girls, comrades, compañeros, welcome back to, I was going to say the Fifth Column, that's the other show that I do. This one's the Moynihan Report, right? Is that what we're here for? We're here for that one? Guys, there's a lot. I mean, this is the most serendipitous, fortuitous booking of all time because I spend way too much time at a website called Mediaite. And the reason I do so is because a long time ago, Dan Abrams and his founding editor, who's here with us today, decided that I didn't have to watch all the slop all day, that they would find clips here and there and put them on the internet, and then I could watch them, right? I'm sure you do this too. But Mediaite has been a steady part of my media diet probably since 2000, what? 12?
2009.
9?
Yep.
Holy shit, it's one of the ones that survived. And we have the original, the survivor, he's not gonna give up. Colby Hall is the founding editor of Mediaite. I'm getting a echo in my ear. I'm sorry, guys. I just got an echo in my ear. That's fine. But now I'm going to go back to what I was saying because he won a Peabody Award. I say it like I'm from Massachusetts. Peabody Award, not Peabody.
I like it.
Peabody is in Massachusetts. Peabody Award winning Colby Hall has joined us on a day when shows are getting canceled and you're writing columns about it. Jimmy Kimmel is out. Colby Hall is here to tell us what's going on.
Thanks for having me. Big fan. And I will say there's no shortage of news. I appreciate the kind words about Mediaite. We launched the site in 2009 with the idea that we can cover the intersection of politics and media, and that in a weird way, there's a space for not just the news, but also, given the politicized nature of opinionated news outlets, it's more important what, at the time, Bill O'Reilly or Rachel Maddow said about the news than what actually happened. Yeah. And so we paid attention so you didn't have to, right?
Like, do you now, I'm sure I know the answer to this question if I thought hard enough about it, but you're here, so you can answer it for me. But it was cable news for a very long time, but now you have podcasts and Tim Pool and all these people I don't pay attention to. Is that part of the makeup of the website too? When people say crazy shit?
It's mostly Tim Pool.
It's
what's underneath that skull cap?
I really want to know. Your wristband. What would Tim Pool say?
Well, no. The truth is, when we launched, we had 3 categories of content. It was television, print, and online, which reveals where we were at that time. And then we started aggregating third-party video content, right? Yeah. And then we quickly sort of became like, here are the crazy or best. Like we would aggregate like a great Vice report, or here's a crazy thing said on Fox News, or a good fight, or whatever. You didn't have an hour to watch a certain show, here's the moment you needed to see. Now the challenge is it speaks volumes of who we are as a society.
But that's what X does and Twitter, right? But it's aggregates video.
I think the best metaphor is that we're a DJ that you like to listen to. Meaning we curate the content with a specific point of view, and we frame it with a headline that isn't funny, but has a little bit of a wink and a nod that is a sort of, ideally is smarter than it needs to be. But you're right, to get to your question, we no longer have that shared experience where everyone's watching, well, it used to be broadcast news programs, and then it became sort of primetime cable. Now the biggest and most influential outlets are on YouTube and stream shows like this where not everyone is watching. So the need for a place that can aggregate the most important content has never been higher, but the challenge is also way more difficult because it's easy to just watch dumb shit on Fox News or MSNBC. Yeah. Forgive my language, but
there's a lot of dumb shit on both of us.
Okay, good. We're gonna. Brendan Carr is.
No. We're not under the thumb of the FCC.
Understood.
Yeah.
But it's way more difficult when like Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz prattle on for 2.5 hours. Like, who's gonna find the moment that is like that's gonna make your hair stand on edge? Like, what's the most notable moment?
Are we sort of overplaying the influence of some of these people, or are they appropriately sort of reflected in the media as influential? When you see somebody like, this is a Donald Trump media strategy before the last election, going on Theo Vaughn, right? Going on Joe Rogan, going on Andrew Schultz, doing all that stuff.
Big thinkers.
And I will say that I will be negative about all of them, but my friend Andrew Schultz, who I think is actually a really smart
he's
guy.
Great. He actually knows what he's doing.
And by the way, Andrew, who I just had a text fight with the other day about Epstein, I'm not saying what the texts are. I'm not saying like you got to come and subscribe like some of these people you've seen in the last couple of days. You want to see my text with somebody who was just murdered? Yeah, come and subscribe. Nothing gross or ghoulish about that. But there's obviously this idea that those people carry an enormous amount of weight. I know that the idea from within the Trump campaign, when it was Barron Trump that was pushing a lot of that, said go on these things. And I think that actually the Theo Von interview was the only time I've looked at Donald Trump and seen a human, when he was asking questions of Theo Von about drugs. And he was like, so what's it like? What is that like being on? And that was like a moment that I was like, oh, wow, it's the first time I've seen him not performing.
Well, no, I think that's an excellent point. And what's great about Theo Von is he's kind of, there's the, I'm going to date myself, there's a character, Chauncey Gardner from Being There, where he was like sort of, what's great about Theo Von is not that he's insightful, but he's like, he's been through a lot of trauma and experience in his life, and he has this like zenned out wisdom. And so to your point, when he got with Trump, I think Trump kind of like let his guard down and just sort of was himself. The broader question is, Trump went to those guys because they were delighted that they had access, and the implicit sort of agreement in part of this access media world was they weren't going to ask tough questions. They were going to bro out with him, and that's precisely what he wanted and needed, was to sort of be human. And like 2.5 hours of Joe Rogan talking about dumb shit is ideal. And also it sort of exploited where Kamala Harris's weakness, where she was unable to kind of like, she was. Sure. It also speaks volumes. She was unable to let her guard down. She was afraid of a trap, but it also speaks to the Democrats' problem with it's a big tent, but they give so much sort of succor to anyone that plays identity that they parse their words so precisely for fear of offending someone that they say nothing. So I think Kamala Harris was actually did as well. She could have been expected, but
well, she did one thing that I can think of in that time, and they didn't air it. It was the Subway series with a guy that I kind of knew a little bit back.
Oh, really?
I
didn't know about this.
You know about this way where she gave an answer about her favorite spice, and it was something so incoherent that they didn't air it because it was so. I think they thought it would be bad for her, and there were people that were clearly supporting her. But when she tried to do that kind of off-the-cuff thing, sitting on the subway, broing out in a way, she failed and just face-planted because she doesn't know how to be a real human. That's, of course, Trump's strength, is that it's not somebody that we all recognize as a human that we'd hang out with, but he's funny, and it's like he's just legitimately funny.
He's Don Rickles. He's Archie Bunker.
Yeah.
And he also, honestly, is like a guy. He's a tour de force. Like he is like just a pure, well-trained muscle of aggression, aggrievement. Like you put him in front of a mic, he's never going to sway from the message. And it's irresponsible, it's often incorrect, and it's indefensible, but it's effective. And I'm not trying to puff him up, but like the dude's a machine in the worst possible way. Like he's a genius. He's an evil genius. And I
mean, when there were people on MSNBC after the Biden age scandal and after he dropped out saying, well, Trump is looking like he's losing a step. It's like, no, do not try that. I mean, because he doesn't look like that to me. He might physically look, worse, but he's still on his toes and funny when somebody shouts out the question. He has some Rickles-like insult to shout
That's
back.
his game. He loves that. Like you honestly, like he's maybe terrible at every other thing that he does, but when it comes to like, there's a microphone. The joke was like the most dangerous place to be in DC is between Chuck Schumer and a microphone.
Yeah.
Truth is, it's Trump. Like he's like, oh, you want to ask me a question? You want to get like he's not a president.
It was also that comparison that you saw during not even during the last years of the Biden administration, but during all four, when you couldn't get him to do a press conference, you couldn't get him in front of media. Yeah, and then Donald Trump, you couldn't get him to stop.
Right.
It'd be 3 hours of him doing this stuff. But I want to talk about, in a way, something similar, which is the old media versus new media, because we're talking about the FCC today, and we're talking about a lot of people trying to learn what the hell's happening. What does the FCC even do? There's a couple of conversations I've had today, as a matter of fact, with people who I wouldn't expect to know these things. But the Jimmy Kimmel situation, it's been something that's really rattled me, not because of what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. That didn't surprise me too much. It's the response from people who what I honestly did expect to defend free speech a little more and look at this as a First Amendment issue, and seeing the number of people say, well, look what happened to Roseanne. Look what happened to that woman that was in Star Wars or something that got canceled. Yeah, sure, that's bad. But do you not understand the difference here? Do you really, truly not understand the difference here? But watching Jimmy Kimmel and various people within the universe of ABC, from Disney to the local broadcasters, collapsing when, weirdly, the same day, the commissioner of the FCC said, you do it the easy way or the hard way. You wrote a column about this, which I disagree with some of it too, so we'll have a good conversation about this, I hope. But give me your sort of reaction to when you heard that. I mean, you work, laboring in the vineyards of media all the time, right? This is what...
Stomping the grapes of media.
Yes, stomping on the grapes of media. And
so glamorous.
I'm sure that this didn't really surprise you, considering Trump said things for a while now, like, we're coming after you guys.
It felt very much fait accompli. It felt like this was that Kimmel. Eventually, he was going to say something that was going to be used to sort of as a pretext for his outing. The thing that he said, I thought was dumb. It wasn't funny, but it wasn't offensive, and it certainly was.
It's also not what it is being portrayed as. I think there's some people going way too far and saying, well, he actually said something that was pretty benign. I don't think it was benign. But can we put up, what's his name? Benny Johnson, the plagiarist extraordinaire, who's the man with 15 lives in conservative media, had the conversation with Brandon Carr, the FCC commissioner, which is what precipitated all of this. I went and found the thing because I wanted to listen to the whole thing. And this was the thumbnail. Can we have the thumbnail? That was the thumbnail. And in this thing, and take a look at this, beyond the bad AI, he has Jimmy Kimmel holding a sign that says his own fault, which if you watch, Benny Johnson and all these people in his universe saying, he's lying. He's making up things that he didn't say. That Charlie Kirk never said that about, black women and their brain power. It's out of context, et cetera. You're literally advertising your thing that says that Jimmy Kimmel said he was assassinated, but it was his own fault, when he never even said that. I'm like, do these people have any principles whatsoever, or is it just politics? It's driving me a bit bananas. I mean, I expect very little from Benny Johnson.
There's so much to unpack here, but to just nail that image and to get to the essence of your question, yes, it's an asymmetrical fight in that what Benny Johnson and his ilk, the Tim Pool said, that's what they do every day, all day. It pales in comparison to this fairly innocuous politicization of the reaction to Charlie Kirk's death that Jimmy Kimmel did.
Yeah.
But what's at issue is that Kimmel is on ABC, so it's under this weird rubric of the FCC, and that the new head of the FCC, Brendan Carr, is literally working as Trump's jackbooted thug to exert authoritarian rule over media outlets that Trump doesn't like. And Trump loves just, lauded how great Brendan Carr was, but Brendan Carr is just like, he is openly threatening in kind of mob boss language that, if ABC, they could either suspend or fire this guy, or they will invite FCC investigation into how they're doing their business. That is a mob boss threat. And so purely from a business decision, Bob Iger and Disney execs decided, hey, we want to, we're trying to buy, what is it, Fubu or whatever, this sort of hard to keep
for
track
us, by us broadcasting. That's what,
They really want to get into the,
the
colorful,
apparel.
baggy hip hop outfits from the early 90s. But it's like there's a Tubi or there's some sort of streaming thing that they want to acquire, and they need FCC, they need the Trump administration to buy it. So here's the thing is, it's not that Bob Iger and media executives are necessarily political or even principled. They just want to make a decision that, removes conflict and it helps their bottom line. So it's an absence of principled decisions. And
is there any argument that is coming from the MAGA side or Trump's supporters about this pressure? I wouldn't even say pressure. I'll say about the end of Jimmy Kimmel and ABC. It's temporary and he might come back. We'll see. That you find at all convincing when people say, well, there is a hypocrisy argument that nobody gives a shit, for instance, when the Biden administration was putting pressure on Facebook and people like that. That's a bad thing too.
I think that's a false equivalency, because I think the the Twitter files and the sort of COVID stuff, like that was early days and there was real concern and we didn't know what we didn't know. And did we err on the side of
Despite all that, is that the government's business to be having a list of the dirty 10 out in that, like that Jen Psaki is talking about, and these people who are spreading misinformation, which some of which didn't turn out to be misinformation, incidentally, because you're right, it was early days. But is that the government's business at that point, using the pandemic to put pressure on social media companies? I mean, I don't go so far as say that this was, American fascism, as a lot of people did. People went very, very far with that argument. But there was something certainly concerning about the government talking to private media companies about what they're publishing.
Well, I think it begs the question of like, what is the role of government to, like, I think social media outlets like X and Facebook and Instagram, they see themselves as a utility and they can't be held responsible for the stuff that things are said. So how does one moderate the content that's on their platforms? And that's an impossible sort of philosophical debate about like the ephemeral nature of meaning itself. And so they want to say like, no, it's just that. But does that mean that like hate speech and racism could exist on, anti-Semitism can flourish on X? Well, it sort of has under Elon Musk because he removed all moderation. Was the moderation under sort of the previous era like too lefty and too overwrought? Yes. I think it's easy to criticize because there's not an easy solution. But to the sort of the previous issue, like what role does what are conservatives saying? I found it interesting that Don Jr. said like we're learning that it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture.
That is a right out of the playbook of people on the left. You say the exact same thing.
Well, that's exactly right.
Exact same thing.
But and I just think that the irony, because that's precisely what we had heard.
Yeah, sure.
The one thing that I think that really resonated was like a guy like Guy Benson, who's a Fox News guy, and he's
I love Guy.
He's conservative.
He's a very good guy. Yeah.
He's principled, and he was like, so all of my conservative friends are celebrating this. Let's just take pause and think, if this had happened under the Biden administration, under the same exact, how would we be reacting?
Well, my friend Kennedy said the same thing today when she was on the Fox show Outnumbered. I think I saw this on Mediaite actually. And it, what a useful website. And I found it on Mediaite because, she was doing the thing about how, bad Jimmy Kimmel is. And she stopped at the end and said, look, and this is a very interesting case, because Fox News is not governed by this, obviously, because they're in the cable. But Fox Broadcast is. So there is pressure you can apply to when you have Fox Broadcast and you have Fox News. And she said, what is going to stop these people, if Democrats can manage to ever win another election and actually run a good candidate, from them doing this to us? And I wouldn't blame them if they did, because this is where we are with this tit for tat thing. And no one ever thinks, as they didn't think in the Bush era, George W. Bush, that the growth of executive power would ever be in the hands of Barack Obama.
Right.
And he grew it, and then Donald Trump has grown it to a place, Biden too, is that once you start this thing, so the argument from people on the right that I hear endlessly is, you guys are principled, you're libertarianish, you care about the First Amendment. We're losing this culture war, and now we're playing their game.
Right.
We don't give a shit about principles, and now we're winning.
Right.
And there is something to that. They are winning because they're playing dirty, and they're doing smash mouth politics.
Well, I wrote a column a while ago that you can't win a debate with someone who's willing to lie, right? And, we talked about Tim Pool. He put out a tweet today about how it was a chart of it was a bar graph. It illustrated how a tiny little red bar of Republican or right of center political violence and a huge blue bar of left of center. There was no data. There was nothing. It was clear to me that he just made this shit up, but it was retweeted by Elon Musk. And it was like, it's like a troll. He just made this point. 95% of the people that see that are going to believe that to be true.
There was another one, the opposite version of that too, that I saw right after Charlie Kirk was shot, that showed that most of the violence was right-wing. And the interesting thing about that was that there was a caveat in it. It said, does not include 9/11. I was like, well, why are we not including 9/11? That's like 3,000 people. It's pretty, I don't know if that's left-wing or right-wing, but I don't know, put it on its own special Islamist graph. But, we're talking about, people actually want to show this clip. And I know you people out there who have been, who watch the show, all this stuff. You've been in there. You've been at Mediaite. You've seen all these clips. But I want to show a clip that you probably haven't seen, because I hadn't seen. And it is of Benny Johnson before he talks to the FCC commissioner, Brennan Carr, and he's giving his wind-up. And his wind-up is, very much in the Limbaugh.
Nuanced. It's nuanced.
Yeah, it's very nuanced. But I just wanted to point this out because I just wanted people to see what we are dealing with, who's doing the educating and stoking at the same time. They're stoking the anger and educating people at the same time. And this is Benny Johnson right before his interview with Brennan Carr.
When the audiences that Jimmy Kimmel regularly radicalizes and lies to, given the ABC News platform, which, by the way, is taxpayer funded, with luxurious and lavish gifts from the federal government to ABC, the broadcast network, that have major legal stipulations to them, which are to tell the truth.
Okay, well, Benny Johnson, as I pointed out, is a serial plagiarist. I wish he'd plagiarize from somebody who knows what they're talking about. The idea that ABC, the platform of ABC, is lavishly funded is flat untrue. The FCC does not give money to any broadcaster. They allot bands, and by the way, it's local too. They don't do it to the national ones. They do locally allot the bands to these things, and then they pay the FCC for it, which is how the FCC is funded. So that beginning drove me crazy, just because from the right out of the gate, he's saying things that he's just alliterative things, luxurious and loquacious, and whatever he was saying about the funding, which is not true.
He's a real talent. He's a real thought leader.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked earlier about the podcast bros. What's great about them is that they're largely comedians who are just shooting the shit, and they're not trying. They just kind of want to have fun, and it's like getting high and having conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Guys like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool, they're win at all cost propagandists who have zero commitment to the truth.
Yeah.
So the idea that he would just make shit up, he doesn't care, because he's so committed to that. And, the Midas guys and Ron Flipkow, there's a similar sort of side to the left, but they're not nearly as good at being evil as the guys on the right.
I would love to debate you on that, but I just don't watch enough of them. And the Midas touch, those guys are pretty new.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I don't watch them. I've seen some of their clips here and there, but it is new in the sense that they are now catching up to the fact that, conservatives for so long tried to catch up to culture, because culture had left them in the dust. And it was, Andrew Breitbart that always said, downstream, politics downstream from culture. Fox, do you remember the Fox tried to do the half-hour news hour?
Yeah.
Which was its version of The Daily Show, which it was like one of the most painful. They probably played that at Guantanamo. It was so bad. But they would attempt to do that. But then the shift was, outside of the sort of traditional media, the right was doing it really well.
Right.
I mean, Rogan wasn't a man of the right. I still don't think he is, but he's whatever he is. But he was, quote unquote, my most hated word, platforming people, which we call interviewing people in journalism, platforming people that were not normally getting the platform. And people were like, oh, that's interesting. So they were way ahead on that. And the left is catching up now.
Well, and my friend Michael Hirschman, who I worked with at Spin Magazine and VH1 back in the day, he wrote a column for the New York Times about how the Democrats are all wrong by thinking that they need to find their own Joe Rogan, as if they need like a podcast bro that's like lefty political. And what he pointed out was what I just said. What you're pointing out here is like, Rogan's not really an ideologue. He just is looking to be different and unique, and he's like not well informed, but he's just, exploring something that's different, and he's a sucker for conspiracies, and he doesn't care if he's right or wrong. And in fact, he'll say like, don't listen to me about COVID. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And that's maybe the only responsible thing he's ever done, because, most people that listen to him don't necessarily, and this is going to sound terrible, they don't think critically enough to think that like he's being irresponsible with the way that he talks about this stuff. Like he's just shooting the shit and having fun. And but a lot of people think that he is the news and that it's reliable.
But something similar did happen to late night hosts. I mean, where they all became political. I mean, there was Conan wasn't political. Johnny Carson wasn't political.
Letterman
David Letterman wasn't political. He got
Bill
political.
O'Reilly would be on Letterman, and they would have like
and they would have and even that was late Letterman, where he's getting a little more political. Now he's actually quite political, but that wasn't a thing for late night shows. I mean, that just was not. You were going to have Charles Grodin telling you about. But now, I mean, the thing that exercised conservatives so much, and I agree with them on this, is that when you have Colbert and Kimmel, they just became almost exclusively political shows until they sat down with a guest who was hawking a movie. And even then it was sometimes political, but it was very kind of overwhelming as somebody who grew up in a different era watching those shows. I mean, I watched Letterman religiously.
Same.
Religiously.
Other than Steve Martin, Letterman kind of like
He shaped-
reinvented like the sort of
Correct.
the comedy of like ironic detachment that like
Yes.
sort of like lasted for
I would wait for Chris Elliott to come on for whatever he was doing. But
you and I are the same dude.
That is not what you see now. I mean, these dancing vaccines and things like that. In watching, I mean, one of the most amazing things to watch was watching Stephen Colbert react to Jon Stewart. Did you remember this thing? Because you probably do at Mediaite. Jon Stewart saying, yeah, I think it was probably a lab leak.
Right.
And he did this, and the most amazing fucking response we've ever seen. Stephen Colbert, rather than dealing with this, and Jon Stewart in a very funny way, it's like I'm down the street from the chocolatey factory. Where did all this chocolate come from? And he said, you sound like Senator Ron Johnson, which is not even a joke, by the way. It's like, does he? He just sounds like he's,
Logical.
Yeah. In that, there is that sense with those guys, like, don't bring it here. This is our domain. It's not as if Adam Schiff is coming on all the time.
Yeah.
It's not as if they're having other people. It's an echo chamber. But that's for the fucking market to decide. That's not for the government to decide.
I think the best argument is what you've put forth, is that like, why are these broadcast shows, there's so much to say about this. First of all, broadcast television is anachronistic. The fact that like ABC, CBS, and NBC and Fox are somehow under like the FCC is a bizarre thing that shouldn't, because no one uses antennas
Should not
anymore.
exist.
I think I heard Stephen Battaglia say this on CNN. It's like, why are these media companies even in broadcast anymore? Like, just like everything should be streaming. And so like, I think a lot of these issues will go away. A. B.
But will the government try to do something similar? Because there's always some attempt, both from the right and the left, at government interference in media.
I think that
This is from the New Deal. I mean, this is when the FCC is, yeah.
But if you were like, this is the subjective nature, the ephemeral nature of meaning. Like, if you were to sort of like outlaw opinion, or first of all, we can't agree on facts now because of like everything is deconstructed, everything is semiotic, and so what one person seems to be, we can't agree on facts, we can't agree on truth. So if you were to sort of outlaw bias or make it sort of penalized by the government, then that opens a slippery slope where you couldn't have Newsmax, Fox News, right? So like that's the sort of safeguard there.
And we had that before, by the way, with the fairness doctrine.
Yeah. But
which conservatives hated.
Right.
And now kind of want to bring back.
But cable news is sort of like outside that, right? So, but I think the best argument on the right is that like, why is Colbert and Kimmel like are just like hour-long sort of like progressive, sort of anti-rags? And honestly, I stopped watching it because it was like, it's like turning in like, classic rock and hearing Hotel California for the 10,000th time. I don't need to hear that song again. Yeah. And you're hearing the same bit. And I interviewed Bill O'Reilly recently about his new book, and we talked about a lot of stuff, and it was interesting because he's kind of a progenitor of the form. And he said, I used to go on Letterman all the time. I never go on Kimmel. I never go on Colbert. They only have one point of view. And Colbert, the Colbert Report on Comedy Central was one of the most brilliant TV shows in the history of television. Honestly, future historians will say like, that nailed it. And then when he got The Late Show, people forget that the first year and a half, he wasn't political and it didn't rate. And it was early Trump era. And then he started getting really anti-Trump. And that was like 2018. And he started to rate. And so he got, I think, a little bit addicted to that, and he'll be fine. I think the other thing is that, like, now in like Fallon, Kimmel, Colbert, those shows are like, they create content for Instagram and TikTok.
Yeah.
And you have a $100 million production budget that no one's watching on TV anymore. The math just doesn't work anymore. Colbert's a very talented and a lovely guy. put him in a room like this with like 3 other people, and he will entertain you. And it will cost, what, $5,000?
But I also would wonder how he would do in a debate situation, in the sense that, Jon Stewart is exceptionally good at it.
Right.
Exceptionally good at it. Even though I more often than not disagree with him, I think he's an honest broker, a pretty straight shooter about this stuff.
He's fact-based.
And he's pretty fact-based, and he tries to, and he will debate people. He just had my friend Nick Gillespie on his podcast, and it was like, do you guys love each other this much? I mean, they're absolutely opposites, but it was respectful. And I think part of the culture that, and maybe we can ask if Mediaite is a part of this in a way, that, argument culture that is not really argument. It was wrestling. I was going to say WWF. It's WWE.
Kayfabe.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's that thing that you see from Piers Morgan now, is that, okay, here's a Holocaust denier, a drooling anti-Semite, some half-wit comedian, whatever, it's screaming at each other in this 6 boxes. And it's like, wait a second. Oh, this is made for Instagram and made to be cut up.
It's Abby Phillips' show, which is like the hottest show on CNN right now.
Exactly, but that's the thing.
It's programmed to be a train wreck.
It is programmed to be a train wreck.
So let me just say that the biggest problem I have with Mediaite is that which you just pointed out, is that I often worry that we are adding to the distraction culture, because we're just saying, hey, look at this shiny fight that is meaningless. And
but it is what people want.
But also I think that, there is some value in to say, like, this is where we are in the Socratic debate of our society. Maybe that's how I rationalize it, but it is a concern that I have. Absolutely. That's not all that we do. I write columns and we cover like good reports and everything, but Trump says something crazy on Truth Social, we hop all over it. We say, he said this crazy thing. I know full well that we're taking the bait and we're like helping him change the narrative, because no one's better at like shaping the media narrative than Trump is, often in a way that like helps him. But are we, it's Neil Postman's, we're, amusing ourselves. It's not, when we look at news as entertainment, it's decay. And I think that's where we are right now. We are a decayed society because we are caught up in this kayfabe, this sort of pro wrestling, like good guy, bad guy, and we've lost the plot about what's really happening.
No, the lack of gatekeepers was something that I celebrated for most of my life. It was very beneficial to me. I didn't go to Columbia Journalism School. I'm
sorry, I got to go.
On my No, if you had, did you go to Columbia Journalism School?
No, I'm from Kansas. I'm a poor, simple man.
Okay, well, you're a poor, simple man from Kansas. That sort of stuff was great to me, of just being able to do it on my own, and that's essentially how I became a journalist. But at the same time, in the gatekeeper sense, I liked it better when not all of my friends had politics. Right. Everybody has politics now.
Right.
And everybody has stupid politics. And that's why I kind of, my skin crawls a little bit when I hear these arguments of who's worse on X front, on, conservatives more violent, liberals more violent, blah, 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 which I think is actually missing the point. But I have had friends tweeting things, putting things on Instagram, celebrating Luigi Mangione.
Right. No,
it's like, what has happened?
Let me push back.
I liked it when fewer people were involved in what I do.
Let me push back a little bit, but I will say I agree with you. Like, I don't. The last thing I want, like, I use Instagram to post photos of my kids. Maybe I'll promote a column that I've written, but I don't want to learn how strident you are one way or the other. But I will say the thing you said about like you liked it when people are not so obsessed with politics, I think that's kind of an East Coast New York phenomenon. And I went to Kansas in August for a golf trip with old college friends, and these are good old friends that I know very, very closely and I love dearly. In a weird way, they're my focus group outside of my Brooklyn world. They think I'm the most liberal person they know.
Yeah.
In Brooklyn, where I live,
Might be true.
I'm the most conservative person in like Brownstone, Brooklyn. But we didn't talk about politics at all. And when we did, it was very, sort of light level. And their position was like, you know what? Honestly, like the more we care about, like the more we talk about it, it doesn't matter. Our lives are going to be the same. And this is Wichita, Kansas. And then I was in Kansas City. So I think there is a phenomenon in like certain like San Francisco, LA, DC, New York, what have you, where people are obsessed with staring at their own navel and talking about this stuff. I don't necessarily know. I think the rest of the country isn't quite like that. And when people are like that, it's kind of why Trump resonates, because he keeps it simple and people want to hear a simplistic message of like, oh, I'm patriotic. It's good. It's okay to feel, my 22-year-old son is like, I'm tired of my generation like shitting on patriotism. Like I kind of want to reclaim being, a patriot. I'm like, I'm down, dude. Like, let's get a flag. Like,
I actually had this conversation today of, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up going to hardcore shows and straight edge shows and punk rock shows. And I never thought I'd be in that place where I was on a podcast today with Coming Soon with my friend Amanda Knox. And we were talking about this idea, and I was talking about the idea of travel. When you're younger, it makes you say, why don't we have these fast trains from the airport? But it also makes you much more patriotic. And I said to Amanda, I was like, our justice system, for all its problems, isn't the Italian justice system now, is it?
Right.
And like, there's so many things where I'm just like, wow, it is terrible. And this is where I get to your column too. I'm going to object to your column, is that the number of things that people are pulling their hair out about and saying we're trundling down the road to fascism are completely boringly standard in almost every other country on earth, particularly in Europe. I mean, you have Graham Linehan, a comedian who did Father Ted, being arrested by 5 armed police officers. You might know that people in England who are police are not armed.
Right.
But at the airport, they come 5 armed guys for tweeting something about some trans thing. I don't even know exactly what it was, some joke. But he was arrested, and he has to go to court for that. If that happened here under Donald Trump, we would be like, where are the Nazis? This is the jackboots. But there's so much garbage out there in Europe. I lived in Europe for a long time that really alarmed me, that made me come back home and be like much more patriotic. It's much easier to live here in certain ways. Now we can talk about healthcare and mass transit and all that stuff.
Right.
Smaller countries, it's different. But as far as just like general human freedom, I always was happy to be home. But to your column, the premise of your column is that people say Donald Trump is a fascist. They don't say that because the media is convincing of it. It's because he acts like a fascist. Tell me what you mean by that.
well, no, let me reframe it in the way that I intended.
Yeah. Well, that was the headline.
The point of the column was, I'm right, you're wrong. And I think,
Very fascist of you.
So one of the things that I noticed after sort of like the Kimmel thing was that a growing argument on the right was that the left-wing media is to blame for this because they are irresponsibly saying that Trump is a fascist.
Yeah.
And my argument was, I allowed the fact, don't touch me,
Yeah.
I allowed the fact that, yes, the left has been sort of irresponsible, but that overlooks the fact that Trump has acted really authoritarian. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that he is doing things that are absolutely fascist. Now, the problem is, I think a lot of people, when you say fascist, they immediately think Hitler and Holocaust or maybe Mussolini. And really, that's irresponsible. Trump is not Hitler. But in terms of the what he's doing in sort of like undermining the press, sort of vilifying his enemies, there's a long list of things that he's doing. He is acting in an authoritarian way.
You're right about the second bit, but that's a different word. Is he authoritarian or is he a fascist? I object to the fascism thing, and I object to it for a bunch of reasons. But when you say somebody silences dissent, goes after the media, has a personality cult, that's Hugo Chavez, right? Is he a communist?
Right.
It's Fidel Castro. It's
Well, you
Joseph
could argue
Stalin.
that, but
right?
by definition of fascism, those guys are fascists. They're also communists.
Maybe,
communists.
but,
I mean, we're playing a little bit of a semantic game of.
Well,
like,
that's why I think
definition.
That's why I think these polls that people cite are essentially useless, because 89% of people think this. 50, when it comes to fascism, none of them know what fascism means.
Well, but
scholars can't agree on
That's
what
fine,
fascism is.
but that poll was being used by Eric Schmidt, who's a MAGA influencer, who said, "Look, the problem is the media is ginning up this fascist narrative." And Elon Musk retweeted that and said that that's terribly concerning, and that's really problematic. And so you're right. I think people don't understand that, but I think objectively, if you look at the things that Trump is doing, he's not Hitler, he's not Mussolini. He's doing things that are very, very outside the norm, that are illiberal, that are outside the norm.
For sure, outside the norms,
But
sure.
authoritarian, and what's the difference between authoritarianism and fascism?
A lot, because there are non-fascists who are authoritarians, right? I mean, there are communists who are authoritarians. Fascism, I would say,
Would you argue that what he's doing is not fascist?
absolutely not. 100% not.
But don't you see the parallels between what he's doing with, say, like,
Well, I see the parallels of what he's doing with a lot of
the
people.
press and the fake news, and the press are the enemy of the people?
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that do that, right? There's a lot of authoritarians that do that. You seem surprised by this.
I am.
Well, I'll tell you what. A cop-out argument is to say that it's not Mussolini and Hitler. If you ask
not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it
90%
is.
of people what a fascist is, do you think they're going to say Salazar in Portugal? You know what you're going for when you say fascist.
No.
It's supposed to be redolent of
Well,
Hitler.
I
That's
added
why you're
that
doing
caveat.
it.
Well,
That's why you're doing it.
So I added that caveat, and I agree with you. And I actually even said, like, this says more about the declining standards of U.S. education.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. And so
Why choose fascist? Because you're trying to evoke the worst possible people you can think of without exactly saying Hitler. Because you're not, I mean, not even Mussolini. I mean, you're not talking about Franco. I mean, because, you know, Trump isn't a Catholic. He's not a Catholic fascist or a Catholic authoritarian.
So your argument is that the media correctly calling him fascist should temper their message because the audience is dumb.
It's not correctly calling it fascist.
I fully disagree with you.
But what is fascist?
I think the media has a responsibility to speak
everything
truth to people who get
everything
it,
that
and
you
not
listed,
soften their message.
Everything
to
that you
dumb.
listed applies to Castro,
No,
applies to Stalin,
I like the
applies
spirited
to
conversation.
Yeah.
You just argued that people don't get the real definition.
They don't.
But that's their fault. Like you can't blame the media for calling truth.
Okay,
like
so
they're saying
you're gonna honestly sit across from me and tell me that when people are calling Donald Trump a fascist, when there's probably more precise words, authoritarian works. That's fine. Why not use that? Because you were using them interchangeably. So why use fascist?
I think
it's evocative
in my
of
mind,
something.
they're fairly interchangeable. I don't think. I think fascism is. I think
not
to
all
your point-
authoritarians are fascist. All fascists are authoritarian.
Okay, fair. But I don't. And I say in my column, like, not all fascists are Hitler or Mussolini. There is a spectrum of fascism.
That's not what it's supposed to evoke.
No, because you're taking.
No one is thinking like, oh, I just mean
No.
Franco.
This is where you're wrong. This is where you're wrong.
No one's trying to say
You're
that.
taking your own definition of what fascism is and applying it to how everyone understands that. And I'm using the strict definition that you would be in an academic book.
But you're not even this.
I'm treating the word. I'm treating the word
not.
and people like they understand what the definition is, and not what you think it is as something worse than it is. I think you're being I think you're just as bad as like Greg Gutfeld saying.
Goodness.
Yes, because you're saying like, it's irresponsible to say this word that's factually true.
No, it's not factually true.
It
You're
is.
saying things that are authoritarian. You haven't said corporatism once, which is what the basis of
that's a
fascism
pivot.
is.
No, you're just something else.
No.
That's
You're
just- you
asking
just
for
lost
a
the argument.
definition of fascism. You gave me definitions that also apply to other authoritarian regimes, right?
Right.
I'm saying something that's very specific that does not apply to other authoritarian regimes, which is corporatism, which is what Italian fascism was, and that's the mingling of state, particularly in economics. That is the same thing of true of Hitler. That is kind of true also of Salazar and Franco and the Iberian Peninsula, but we're saying it for a very simple reason. It's because it's redolent of Hitler. We're not doing it because it's so precise, because everything that you've said can also be applied by calling him a Stalinist, by calling him a Chavista, by calling him somebody who follows Maduro, the Sandinistas.
But those are specific to those leaders. Those are specific to those
are
leaders.
authoritarian tendencies.
Well, I need a cigarette after that now.
I'm vaping. So do we have a vape for him?
No, I don't.
No,
I'm good. I don't vape.
No, it's okay. You're wrong. That's fine. You can just admit that you're wrong and that you're doing it because you're trying to make people think of Hitler.
I like to aim for a smarter audience. You are different in that way.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like,
I
look,
aim for the one that has the definition of fascism at their fingertips.
I think this gets to the essence of the challenge we have, is that you and I in the world, every individual in this kind of like postmodern world has their own definition of words as they see it. We can't agree on basic definitions. My argument in that column was that fascism, in a pure academic sense, that was not, as I think you said, redolent of
Hitler.
Of Hitler.
Yeah.
I argued that you're right. That's a problem. But the problem is,
You don't think people are trying to make that connection by saying
I
fascism?
think Joy Reid was doing that. I think a lot of like the extremists on the right, and I honestly said that in the piece, and I probably could have made that argument better, that the left created a problem of their own doing by precisely that argument. That said, what Trump is doing is factually close. Like, there's a lot of evidence that he's being fascistic, and the Jimmy Kimmel, Brendan Carr thing is the best example. And I know that you agree with that, and there's concern there. But like, if I think if we're sort of going to debate the semantic meaning of fascism, what does that say about this?
We have to, because it's a word with a definition.
Right, but like I think we're losing sight of the forest through the trees. Like, I mean, like look, I'm not.
You can.
I think there's plenty of room to criticize the media for the way that they've irresponsibly portrayed Trump. So that we're finally at this place where the fascist wolf has arrived, and no one cares because he's been irresponsibly called a fascist since 2017. And I think that the 2025 project version of second term Trump is actually fascist. And we're like, no one's freaking the fuck out.
I think there are a lot of people freaking out.
You're not.
No, I'm not. And the reason I'm not is not because I think that this is a great time to be an American and a great time for American governance. I mean, I think that this stuff, waking up to the reactions, especially to the news about Kimmel, was revealing. And it's terrifying in a lot of ways, because I have a lot of people that I don't really have a side, but I say that there's people that tend to be people I trust or my allies on things not being that. In making excuses for this and saying, well, his ratings were low, he was going out of business anyway, so we'll let it go. What conservatives should be doing, and I'm not one of them, but what conservatives should be, is my tip for you guys, is be arguing that the FCC is antiquated and should be eliminated, and the government has no business getting involved in these broadcast bans that made sense when they were limited in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. That is a concept that should be gotten rid of. Conservatives hate government power, theoretically, but they love government power now when Brendan Carr can use that government power to turn the screws on people that they disagree with. I think that is horrible stuff. I think there's previous examples of it in America. I think this is one of the worst ones that I've seen, especially in modern times. But the good thing that has given me a bit of, taking away some of the sleepless nights about this stuff is the courts have been pretty rough on Trump. And so far, with some exceptions, particularly when it comes to immigration, they've had to contend with that. And they haven't said, fuck you, we're just going to be a fascist. Because what fascists do is they disable the court. Well, the first thing that the Nazis
You're right. And so okay, everything you said I agreed with. And I appreciate that. I will say a lot of the court decisions have trended in a way that have upheld what I think to be our constitutional rights. However, I think there's a lot of stuff that remains as it goes up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is largely conservative, and that is sort of that's the bull.
The MAGA people they think Amy Coney Barrett is one of the worst people to ever live.
Oh, the irony.
They hate half of these people because, we have 9-0 decisions, a whole bunch of them recently. Right. You've had people on the conservative side of the court that have flipped, and there's been 5-4 decisions. There's been, all sorts of, and I have a certain amount of trust, not in all of them. I think some are more trustworthy than others, but I think they generally try to be outside of politics, generally.
Right.
And I think there's less of that in the past when, Scalia and Ginsburg would go to a pie eating contest together or whatever the hell they did and be best friends. They were very close. Yeah.
Pie eating contest?
Yeah, that's
your go-to.
That was, Ginsburg was huge she was very, very famous into pie eating. I can't believe you didn't know that.
That's your reference?
Yeah.
I like it.
She was the Kobayashi of pie eating.
I was thinking the opening little short in Stand By Me, where like Danny Hogan barf at a Barfarama.
That's they did that too. The liberal media doesn't report on it. They don't. It's unbelievable. All right, let's go. We have some people out there in Two-Way-Land. Do we have Aaron? Should we go to Aaron first? Is this our Aaron that always has smart questions? It's the smart Aaron. I thought there's a dumb Aaron too. No, there's not. This is the smart Aaron. How's it going, buddy?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. It's a great conversation today, and I really like your publication also. I'm wondering, because I've been doing a lot of interesting reading around the rise of Mussolini, and especially the 1910s to 1920s, before he really sort of became the full El Duce kind of weirdo,
when he was a
cosplay.
Socialist and the editor of Avanti, right? The socialist newspaper.
Well, that, and then also when he fused the state, right? That was really what he did. He fused the state. And I don't think we can argue that that's something Trump is doing at that level. But as much as one could fuse a state in power today, that's what it seems to feel like. And whether it's he holds the, almost puppet master like approval of deals, left and right on, across industries, everyone sort of kissing the ring, and this, sort of centralization of his power, which is in private power too, right? I mean, I think that's what's really.
Hey, Aaron, let me make a bit of
Yep.
Colby's argument for him. I mean, because something I just remembered. I mean, is part of that for you, like the government wants to take 10% of Intel or something, wants to get into the business of everything and do it under the guise of national security? I mean, that's stuff that conservatives of the Heritage Foundation or Libertarians of Canada, they would have been vomiting if they had seen that stuff
socialists.
10 years. I mean, that's socialism, which is that socialist part of national socialism.
And the problem I really have is that I think most of us, I think we're all over 40 or 50 here at least.
No, stop. That's not true.
Well, I'm 55, so, but whatever. We're all some there. We don't probably remember any real Republican that didn't have a strong anchoring constitutionally and didn't remind you all the time.
Yeah, at least didn't say so. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I can just look back for not just the last week or two since the assassination, but just in general, is this sense of just complete unadulterated thirst for power, independent of constitutionalism, which I find just strange, right? I mean, I would almost argue
fascism.
Well, no. What I would call it, no. I know you're
answer.
What I would call it is not the Republican Party. No. The thing I was going to say is that it's not the Republican Party anymore. Because if you remember the transformation from the original, you have the Democratic Republican Party as party versus the Federalists. Then you had the Whigs versus the Democrats. Then it was Republicans. And that was what we've been baked into. I would argue we're in some transition that's post-Republican Party. Maybe they're using the Kohl's brand white labeling still, but it's still basically not that old party. It's
100%. 100%. I agree with you. And I think you could argue that there's benefits to Trump's approach in that he's brought back sort of patriotism, and there's some sort of traditional sense, values that people really love, and that's worked. And there's part of that I can get behind. But to your point, centralized power and the fact that everything needs to go through his desk to sign off of. And by the way, he's, making scads and scads of money. Yeah. He's doing AI conferences in Dubai and doing sort of meme coin stuff, making a ton of money on the side.
And using, as I say, Use and Kude, as his sort of as his threadbare to be able to cut his crypto deals.
Well, their jobs are to hoover up as much cash as they can, and it's been effective.
Did you just refer to Don Jr. as either Usay or Kude Hussein?
Well done.
It's a simple answer. Could either one of those step into Iraq, run it like Saddam? Without him, no. Could either one of those two guys run things like Trump right now? No. So yes, Hussein.
Good stuff, Aaron. Yeah. Good stuff, Aaron.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. I think that's there's a lot in there. He said something about the Charlie Kirk thing, which we hadn't actually talked about. When you saw that news and through the lens of Mediaite, which is looking at so many reactions to this, and everyone seems to have gone crazy. It drove everyone a bit crazy. Is that an inflection point, you think, in some ways? Because I know there's one lone guy, but there is, as my co-host of the Fifth Column, Matt Welch, is always concerned about, there seems to be just a different feeling about political violence these days. It seems to be more common, if not acceptable, but sort of understood that this is part of the culture that we're in right now.
I will open by saying that I was not necessarily a fan of Charlie Kirk's. And I say that only to then preface the fact that I was shocked by how saddened and upset I was by his assassination. Less about him and more because I thought it was sort of a symptom of a very unhealthy body politic. Yeah. And I just assumed it was a left guy that did it. That almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And especially Charlie Kirk, because he was a guy that put himself out there and sort of engaged in debate. I don't think that he debated necessarily with like in a fair reason. And I wrote a column over the weekend that said like Charlie Kirk's final act was making his death even like a debatable topic because he sort of.
I mean, look at the reaction to what Ezra Klein wrote in the New York Times. I mean, he was absolutely piled on.
100%. You couldn't say. There was no acceptable way, and again, it felt like a loyalty test, and it still feels like a loyalty, which, by the way, is another bullet point in the fascist thing, which I don't want to return to, which I enjoyed that argument. But like, I've said, and I still feel like it was a deep scar in American history, and it will forever sort of deify Kirk's standing, which I don't love. He seemed to be a very lovable guy with people that knew him close, but he said a lot of hateful, bad things that I disagree with. And, I think I wrote a column that I didn't publish, but it was an open letter to President Trump that said, like, we need a time for a sort of like calming sort of partisanship or bipartisanship in a way that sort of, I don't know, hung a lantern on the fact that he was unable to do that. The way that it's been politicized, especially by the right, has, I think, been very disgusting. The left is being blamed for the crazy comments of like random uneducated people. I think the left has been actually pretty tame in their response. Like,
particularly within the Democratic Party and things
well,
like that.
establishment people who understand that, reasonable people who have some success and intelligence. But
did the Matthew Dowd thing surprise? That actually surprised me when I saw that. I mean, that was.
I think I actually got him fired because I wrote a column about how MSNBC.
Congratulations.
Well, no. The thing is,
Colby, the king of cancel culture. Yeah,
I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Well, no. The other part was that, like, in the moments that happened after the news broke that they shot, that there was this guy who's a political reporter, and then Katie Tur, who I like.
Yeah.
Both said like immediately pivoted to like how Trump was going to exploit that for policy.
Yeah.
And I kind of called that out, and then I later wrote a sort of a mea culpa column that said like, actually, she was right. It has been. The Trump administration has used Charlie Kirk's assassination to kind of go on a revenge tour against his. I mean, he's pledged it, And
I got the first fundraising email today, by the way.
Did you about that?
From Don Jr. about help us fight Charlie's fight, donate now. I just find all that stuff really unseemly.
I feel it's disgusting.
Yeah.
I think most politics are disgusting, but fundraising emails about someone's death in particular. So yeah, I think that we are at a very dangerous inflection point in society, and I fear that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Yeah. Maybe it's darkest before dawn, but I don't think that our leadership, Democrats are AWOL. They don't have anyone there, and I think that the Trump team only know how to always be on attack and exploit these things for their political gain. And that's the last thing that we need right now.
Yeah.
And no one is going to, this could be a transcendent moment. It won't be.
Yeah, I mean, I've pointed out a couple of times that I finally was thinking off the top of my head when I was talking to somebody about this on some show that I do. I don't even remember which one. There's too much of me out there. But how rare it is that, and if you can think of one, I'd be interested to see if you can think of one. It's a very hard question of a pundit being assassinated in American politics.
Right.
Politicians, yeah, it doesn't make it acceptable. It doesn't make it okay. But a pundit being killed seems like a very now thing because we're all online so much and, slings and arrows at each other all the time on this, which is why I don't tweet anymore. I very rarely, maybe 10 a year, 20 a year, because I just find it so toxic. And it is that dopamine rush you get in the fact that you want to respond to the egg on Twitter who said something. I saw something today, by the way, about an interview I did in the show on Reddit. And I was like, this motherfucker. And I was like, okay, stop. What am I doing? Some random person posted something on a Reddit thread about, I did an interview with Alan Dershowitz and they were mad about something or other. Who knows what it was? I didn't even continue reading. But that sort of toxicity is that once the shooter is apprehended in the Charlie Kirk case, the immediate conversation goes to Discord and furry memes, and everything was online, with the exception of the real life thing, which is killing somebody. All the conversation was about his his interactions in this virtual world. And I'm not saying that provokes that. That's the thing that did it. But living in that place just cannot be good. I mean, we know that about kids on their phones. I mean, when your kids are on their phone, you don't say more. You're always saying, stop that, get out there and get out in the world, because you know that there's something that is dark that lurks in that when you're spending all your time there.
I agree with you, but I do think that people of a certain age are blissfully ignorant about the ironically detached layers of extreme online culture, of which this shooter seemed to be a part of, and this whole sort of Groyper versus the kind of white national stuff, where everything is a shit post and nothing means anything. And I feel like when you leave like sort of isolated kids alone in the dark regions of the internet, it festers, becomes toxic, and it turns into political assassins. And, I'm not saying that I'm not trying to assign any meaning to the assassin there, but I think that we do need to see that that's symptomatic of like a bad part of our society, that if we, like, ignoring it isn't going to make it better.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. He's responsible for killing it, but there's parts of our youth culture that is ugly and toxic that we need to understand better before we try to sort of create some sort of remedy around it. Because, again, like, we're devolving. Kids are staring at their smartphones nonstop, and that's like, the printing press. And it took 200 years for the printing press to have a huge impact and change society, and guardrails developed around that. We've had 10 years of a digital society and social media, and there's a generation that came up on that, and we don't really know what that's doing to their brains. And that's a whole other thing around politics. But
and we should have Jonathan Haidt come on the show and talk about his book on phones, and particularly, I mean, it's about everyone, but particularly the effect it has on young girls, and it has effect on young boys too. But what Haidt demonstrates is that on young girls, it has an almost catastrophic effect on self-confidence and things like that. But I will say, well, on this final note, we've been going for a bit, but I will say that the one thing on the fascism thing we can definitely agree on is that there are people that were carrying signs at the anti-Bush protests that I, walked through, didn't attend, but walked through in New York City in 2003, 2004. And there was a Hitler mustache on almost every picture of George W. Bush. This is an old thing. So when somebody says this is the language that creates assassinations, no, because we would presumably see a lot more because we see it so much. But also, people who worry about speech, and this is something that conservatives pretended to care about, previously, before the second Trump administration, they should understand that when things like that come up, it's always going to be solved by trying to mitigate the amount of free speech that we get on various platforms. Fascism creates, violent lunatics. Okay, what are we going to do about that? What is the only option? It's to limit speech. Limiting speech is not good. I spent the morning with my friend Greg Lukianoff from FIRE, the president of FIRE, who has made me calm in saying that, no, you're right, these people are all fucking insane. And they don't like free speech. None of you like free speech. Left, right, center, you're all bastards.
Everyone's
you come
an
to the
asshole.
show.
Everyone's an asshole. That's where I've landed.
Everyone is an asshole. Can we print up those T-shirts? Do we have the capability of doing that on the air and give them away next time?
There we go.
All right, Colby Hall, founding editor of Mediaite.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Please come back.
I'm here.
You live close by.
Anytime.
Love the publication. Go read Mediaite, and just don't read his most recent column, because good Lord, is it not worth it?
A joke.
Oh my, what a joke. How does Dan Abrams not fire this guy?
Fair
does
point.
he have the capability of firing you still?
Last word. That's how it works.
It's my name's right. Yes,
the
my
Moynihan
show.
Report.
Yes, I'm right. Colby's wrong. Go over to the Moynihan Report, at Moynihan Report on YouTube. Subscribe to all that stuff. We're not going to go for clicks by saying all the terrible things about the people that have had bad things happen to them. That's other people's business. Just go over there and subscribe, watch the episodes, and we will be back. What is today, Thursday? All right, we'll be back on Tuesday of next week with another great guest, but I can't promise you it's going to be as good as Colby Hall. See ya.